Thank you everyone for coming for this great session. When you read the Constitution, it says, "We the people." This is how the Constitution starts. It doesn't say, "We are the white people, we are the black people, we are the Latino or Muslims or Jews." It says, "We are the people." And this great statement, it shows that the rights of the constitutions are universal rights for everyone on the United States, living in the United States of America. Whether he is an immigrant with a thick accent like me, or was born and raised, was he white or black or Jew or Muslim, we all enjoy these rights. And these constitutional rights, what actually changed the life of our panel here. The constitutional rights that gave Attorney Akeel the courage and the power to defend the oppressed and to defend the charities and to defend the people and to pursue a career in civil rights. The same constitutional rights that gave Judge Adam Shakoor, the first Muslim judge in the United States, the opportunity to achieve his goal and to do whatever he wants to do in life and be the first Muslim judge in the United States. And the same constitutional rights that made our professor here, Professor Peter Hammer, to make him change his career, change his life and dedicate all his life to promote political empowerment, not just nationally, but internationally. And as I said, we have a great panel here. And inshallah, tonight will be a great night to listen and to understand what they are going to talk about this interesting topic. The first speaker that we are honored to have Judge Adam Shakoor to be the first speaker for this session. Judge Adam Shakoor has been called throughout his life to make a difference, especially for the people in Detroit. That calling led him to career in law, standing up for the rights of others as an attorney and as a judge, to a career in teaching, helping students learn that they can too, they can make a difference, and also a career in government, serving as a deputy mayor and chief administrative officer for Detroit Mayor Coleman Young. In all his careers, Judge Adam Shakoor, a graduate of Wayne State University, has been a leader. Please help me welcome Judge Adam Shakoor, the first American Muslim judge.
Assalamu alaikum. It's my pleasure to be here and to welcome you to this session. It is one in which hopefully we can begin to discuss not just some of the problems, but also look at some of the solutions that we have by coming together and focusing in on how we can make our communities better. Let me just begin by saying, yes, it is indeed a period in my life that I am being honored as being the first Muslim judge, but understand that prior to becoming a judge, I was engaged in the community in a struggle for various things such as community involvement in the schools, where we sought community participation in the school district of Detroit. I was involved in efforts to have a viable newspaper at Wayne State University, print not just what was going on at the campus, but also what was in the surrounding community, because Wayne State was in the center of a community of Detroit where young people were not as involved in the many resources and institutions that the university had. And so we were involved as students trying to get the university to recognize that and got them to participate with us as we developed athletic programs and other things for our community. In other words, what we attempted to do has been something that I learned as a matter of just the history of the United States, that there's always been a struggle and there have always been coalitions. So in order to be most effective, we have to begin to look at working together in forming coalitions and working together and struggling, because everything does not change merely because you hope it changes or because you think it would be better if it does change, but because of people who have an attitude that things can become better by involving all of us in the process. So with the Muslim community, I just say roll up our sleeves together with our neighborhood, with our community, with our businesses, and look at some of the problems that we can make better by our collective work, our collective responsibility, working together. And let me just kind of share a part of the history that I learned that taught me some of the things that I'm going to speak about tonight. In the early period of America, and of course, as we all know, that great instrument, the United States Constitution, that established our nation, the African people who were here were not made a part of that Constitution as the word people or as the word citizen. And there was a famous case in 1857, Scott versus Sanford, known in history as the Dred Scott case, where that was clearly established that the African people were not considered persons within the meaning in which that language was used in the Constitution. And the simple fact is that even though the Constitution had that word, it had a certain duality, because on one hand, it was not even women who were given their rights as well. So while we have come to the level where we are, that not only African people who are born in America or come to America are considered as persons, become citizens, women have the full rights of citizenship and participate in the system as well. Because in the history of the United States, when the states formed this union, they gave up their powers in certain instances and shared those with this new government that was being created called the federal government. They retained some powers, but the most important aspect in this is that they decided, the states decided, who would be the voters, who would be the ones who could participate in electing federal persons to office. The president, the congresspersons, who would be the ones that would participate in that process. And at that time, it was white men who were 21 years of age and older who owned land. As time evolved, because of those coalitions, as those persons who were some of the more enlightened business people, some of the persons who were fighting against the system of enslavement, as they began to form their organizations and eventually prevailed in bringing about a change which made African people citizens, giving them the right to vote, made women basically full citizens in the federal government as well as the states. That concept is called federalism, by the way, where you're a citizen of a state and a citizen of the federal government. They became voters. And then for those young people who were in college when I was in the 1960s and before, we said that if we were old enough to give our lives in Vietnam, we certainly were old enough to determine who would be elected to office to determine whether we would have war or whether we would have peace. So the struggle is that even as America has begun to develop in its distribution of rights more equally, it still is not perfect. It still has room for improvement. And that room for improvement is by the participation of all of us. As Muslims, we have an obligation where we see where things are wrong that we can make them right, to make them right. But we can't do it from a lectern post and say, all right, this is what we're going to do, and we all march in order to that. No. We have to begin to come together, work together collectively, join hands with like-minded people, because the struggle would never have been won by women or by Africans in America for any participation in this system had it not been for like-minded white Americans who said, no, injustice is injustice regardless of race, sex, creed, or any other aspect. So the beauty of the Constitution is it's room for it to grow. It's room for it to become a living instrumentality of change for the betterment of our society. So to that extent, I believe that it's time for Muslims, those that have not yet gone out into the community, and be proud that you are Muslim, but also be proud that you're Americans and be proud that you're a part of a great society that can become greater by the participation of all of us. It makes it better that all of us are allowed to participate and we take advantage of it. So we have to vote, and we have to begin the process of encouraging our young people to vote. Now, in many instances, what we have achieved has a real problem of staying in place if we don't fight to continue to make it stay in place and make it better. I don't mean a physical fight. I mean to fight with our voices, to fight with our activities, to fight to ensure that change for the better stays better. Because in our society, there are always forces that attempt to roll back times to what they think was a better time. What was a better time? A better time to exploit others? What was a better time? A better time to lessen the voice of those who were not wealthy or those who were not a part of the power elite? That was perhaps better for them financially or better for them in controlling the lives and the direction of this nation, but it was not better for the people themselves. So from the standpoint that as Muslims we have a voice, use it. We have not just the freedom of religion, the freedom of press, the freedom of speech, the freedom to assemble, to contest and protest against government wrongs. Don't be silent. Don't lay back and expect others to do the job that you need to have done. And to the extent that you involve yourselves with others in forming coalitions, that is where two people form some group that have similar ideas, share their resources to make some things better. As laborers, we would not have had the minimum wage. As laborers, we would not have the right to have someone represent us had it not been for those workers who came together and said, we need to have a better place to work and we need to have better conditions of work. So my being here tonight is really just to share with you how this model of our Constitution, our government, and change that has been made over the years that we have been in existence has been a continuous struggle, and it has been for the betterment. Whatever problems America has had, whatever problems America does have been in many instances brought into a better situation for change by the work of all of us coming together and working together to create that change. Work within your families, work within your communities, your neighborhoods, your mosques, your Muslim centers, and various other places with others of like-minded. So I'm open to questions, and if any of you have any questions, I believe it's after everybody speaks, but jot them down so you don't forget them, and thank you very much.
Judge Adam Shakoor, it's very inspiring to listen to you and listen to the struggle that our Muslims, the black community went through to have be represented nationally and internationally with renowned leaders like Adam Shakoor. Now we're gonna listen to another inspiring speech from Professor Peter Hammer. Professor Peter Hammer was a Wayne State University Law School professor since 2003. He is the director of the Damon J. Keith for Civil Rights Center. And this center is actually dedicated for promoting educational, economic, and political empowerment of underrepresented communities in urban areas. Professor Hammer has become a leading voice on the economic and social issues impacting the city of Detroit, and has added a new course, or new courses actually, to the law school curriculum on race, law, and social change in Michigan. His work was not just limited to the United States, he actually worked internationally. He spent 20 years of his career in his life engaging issues of human rights, law, and development for poor nations, so many poor nations overseas. Help me welcome Professor Peter Hammer.
It's a real privilege and honor to be here with you tonight. I always think it's important to give tribute to our elders and leaders. I have the honor of directing the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights at Wayne State Law School. Judge Keith, who's now 94 years young, is one of my heroes. He was actually the Grand Marshal for the Thanksgiving Day Parade, so if you had a chance to see the parade this year, you would have seen the judge still hearing cases on the Sixth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals, issued an incredibly important dissent in a voting rights case coming out of Ohio just this last September, in which he reproduced the photographs and short biographies of every single individual who lost their lives during the civil rights struggle. My friend Akeel can say that that's a very unusual tactic. I can't think of anybody else who's done that, but it was incredibly effective to be framing the issue from a historical perspective. And Judge Keith is still out there fighting for social justice and civil rights. I also want to give honor to another one of my heroes, Judge Adam Shakoor here. It's a real privilege to be sitting next to you and to be hearing from the wealth of experience and the struggles that you have guided us. So we're in good hands tonight. Sometimes you ask a professor to come and help kind of frame the big picture. So that's what I'll try to do briefly, because I do think questions and interactions are important. This was an incredibly disturbing election campaign for me. This was an incredibly disturbing election result for me, more so than any other campaign in my lifetime, and there are people with grayer hair than myself, and I think they would echo the same thoughts. And I've been trying to digest why this has been so disturbing for me. One sense is that, as Judge Shakoor was sharing, we actually can say a pretty optimistic story of America as being an expansion of freedom under the guidance of a constitutional document that has had outrageous flaws in it historically, that people, generation to generations, have struggled to make better, right? And I think by and large, we've been a story of success on that front. Never perfect, right? We never will be perfect. But one sense that I found very disturbing is I experienced this election as a giant step backwards, right? Where much of the progress that we had made, secure footing and grounds that we had started to take for granted, is now shaking under our feet. And I'll just be honest, that's scary, right? I talk to my students, talk to the people in the community that I work with. People are afraid. And I think it's important to acknowledge that kind of emotion, because before you can act in effective coalition, you also have to deal with the emotional healing, right, and processing, so you can be strong in the long term and you can start thinking strategically, right? And so after we sort of process the emotional component, it then becomes very important that we start thinking about the strategic components, about how we're going to be responding effectively, collaboratively, in the next number of years. The other thing that I found incredibly disturbing, and I'm thinking now at the campaign and imagining this continuing into an administration, is that every single norm, or many single norms that I found important, were being broken, right? Things that should not be said are being said. And that's dangerous, right? In behavioral economics, they have what they call range effects. So if you're making economic decisions for buying a washing machine, you're thinking about a price between here and there, right? You compare all the models, and all the models happen between a range, and your brain is used to and have the experience of making decisions in that range. And that can be in all sorts of aspects of life. What happened in this election is that all of those ranges were broken, right? All these norms that we took as something important were being violated. Right? So thinking about the attacks on Muslim Americans, thinking about the threats to basic notions of freedom of religion, which are guaranteed in this country, thinking about attacks on immigrants writ large, thinking about attacks on African Americans and sort of how life exists in inner cities, and his descriptions of that, which are incredibly disparaging and unfactual. His attacks against women, right, as sort of being outrageous. And attacks on the media, other sort of important constitutional values that we take, is incredibly important for a stable, functioning, productive, healthy, democratic society. And they were so far off the norm that I think people didn't have the right measuring sticks to really process it. And I find that scary, because the things that I take as normal, right, what guides my decisions, which is my stomach about what is right, what is wrong, what's acceptable, what is not acceptable, is no longer accurate, right? So how can I make decisions? How do I make assessments? How do I think strategically when my compass, right, is being seriously challenged in terms of the violation of norms that I had assumed to be something that were commonly shared with a supermajority of the members of this country. So one thing we have to do is to start thinking how we respond to that, right? One thing I think that all members of the society need to do is to start re-norming, right? Establishing those norms again about basic discourse, what we can say, what we can't say. And that's important. That has to happen in every single community, and that to be something that everybody participates in. Significantly, for the purposes of our discussion tonight, the Constitution is a wonderful norming document. Right? So educating, reinforcing, applying, fighting for the basic standards that we have in this constitutional doctrine, I think will be an important part of making sure that our historic norms will be maintained and respected at a period in our history where they are under substantial stress and under substantial attack. In this renorming process, however, I think we also have to think, what do we think about the presidency as an office? right? And what do we think about the human being that occupies that office, right? I think the constitutional structure is one of our best defenses. And as a result of that, I think we have to respect the presidency, right? That said, and I think this is important, the person who occupies that has to earn respect. And how this campaign has been conducted has violated the norms of respect. And I'm not part of the crowd that says, give him a break. If you ran a healthy, productive election, then we all come around in a circle and have that. When the norms have been violated, it is actually a dangerous norming of him to give him respect he has not earned, right? And I think that's an important difference we have to take, right? We still respect the office, right? We still respect the rule of law, but we demand the man who occupies that office to, through his actions, right, earn the respect of all Americans, right, and not something that we sort of give to somebody who has violated our trust and violated those norms. I also think, as a matter of strategy, we have to be vigilant. Right? I sit on the board of the ACLU. We had 4 hours of board meetings shortly after the election, thinking about how do we as an organization respond, thinking strategically at the Key Center for Civil Rights. How do we think strategically how to respond? And again, I think the starting premise has to be you assume that he's going to do everything that he said he's going to do. Right? Why would you not? Right? If we're surprised later on, if it's less bad, right, it's a whole lot better to be prepared for what somebody has said they're going to do and think strategically in advance about how you will respond than to give somebody and just hope they're going to be different. Right? At 70 years old, my mother's a social worker. She says, by the time you're 7, your conscience is formed. Right? People who are 70 years old are not going to be fundamentally different people than who they were in the campaign. So I think it's very important that we not let ourselves sleep, that we not let ourselves be cut off guard, that we take very seriously the full range of threats that have been put on the table for the Muslim American community, from the Arab American community, for the immigrant community, for the African American communities, right? For women's rights, right, and basic reproductive freedoms, right? That we take that as something that is not a false shadow, and we don't want to have to say it again or see the policies rolled out before we act or we're prepared to act. Right? So I just highlight this notion of vigilance. And then I'll end by talking about a value that Judge Shakoor was talking about. We have to be thinking about acting together, right, in broad, multiracial, interfaith coalitions. Right? And that's not easy to do, right? That's easy to say. That's not easy to do. But that's the only way we're going to be effective. And I can share out more later about what I think that might mean as a matter of strategy, but I'll just say it one more time so you sort of start thinking about what that is. What is a broad multiracial, right? So how is the Arab American community going to be working with the the African American community, the Latino community, the Caucasian community, the Asian community, right? That's difficult because we haven't laid the groundwork to work effectively together. And we're going to have to do that very quickly, and we're going to have to learn as we go. And how do we form more effective interfaith coalitions? Because there's got to be a broad, multiracial, interfaith coalition that can stand up against the powers that may be coming against us. If we can do that successfully, we will be a better America at the end of 4 years than we are right now. Right? Because as we might talk about doing this, we haven't done it very effectively. And this is a real opportunity for us to be coming together and growing bonds that can strengthen all of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for your what you said is actually great because it's actually, as you said, it's actually good to see the big picture, not just to be involved with what's going on day-to-day basis. And now, inshallah, we're gonna listen to Attorney Shereef Akeel. And Attorney Shereef Akeel actually, he was an attorney. He was pursuing his career, working on the insurance side of the law, and one day his life has changed on actually September 12th, 2001. One day after the attacks on New York, a Yemeni guy just stepped to his office and he asked him if he can help him because he was discriminated against. After 9/11, this Yemeni poor worker was fired just because he's Muslim. And he went to Attorney Akeel to ask him for help. And on this day, that was another beginning and another life for Attorney Shereef Akeel when he started pursuing this new career to be one of the most famous and one of the most trusted Muslim civil rights attorney in the United States. To the point that he represented a lot of cases, detainees at Abu Ghraib, the famous prison in Iraq, charities, Muslim charities that got their assets frozen after 9/11. Muslims, they suffered from discrimination. They came to his office, and he has a lot of stories and a lot of on the ground work experience that we can listen and enjoy to, inshallah, to Attorney Shereef Akeel. Help me, inshallah, welcome Attorney Shereef Akeel, and let's listen to his wise words.
Thank you very much. It's a little embarrassing, but thank you. It's an honor first to be among the panel members here. Sitting next to me, Judge Adam Shakoor. He's an inspiration to many young civil activists and aspiring civil lawyers of different religions and ethnicities. And also sitting to his left, Professor Peter Hammer. He's done an amazing job with the Civil Rights Center for Damon Keith, who's the grandfather of civil rights. He's author of that quote, "Democracy dies behind closed doors." Also, I want to thank IONA very much for having this very timely convention, because of what has happened. It's the morning after. That's what basically when we woke up. I know some of you probably were counting the numbers of the votes. I said, if it's God's will, it's going to happen. And I woke up and then, new president. It was like, it reminded me, I don't know how many watched, Planet of the Apes. I don't know if you, where the guy came back from outer space and wow, the world has turned upside down. But you know what? That's the Constitution. And we have to, what distinguishes America from the rest of the world is we accept what the will of the people. Hey, they voted. Their voices were heard louder than others. And, the Constitution is a breathing document, and we have to abide by it. My parents, I'm of Egyptian ancestry, Egypt almost did it. They almost had a revolution. But look, some people could not accept the results. And that's why democracy failed there. And that's a distinction between, so I'm kind of seeing both worlds here. I see the negatives, but I see the positives as well. We have to appreciate that and understand it. It happened. We think back, maybe we should have done more. Maybe that is a wake-up call. Maybe we didn't get out there a little bit more. Coalition built with other organizations. We have two wonderful members here from the Seeds of Peace. They're involved. And when you think about it, many Muslim Americans are first-generation immigrants or are immigrants who've come here and naturalized. And the main focus was, I got to get my education, I got to get my house, I got to take care of my mosque, I got to take care of my kids. But we weren't, this was all internal thought. We weren't thinking outside. Hey, why are many people here? Why are many immigrants here? And keep in mind something that you have as an advantage over many, many Americans. Many, especially immigrants who come here from different countries around the world, from Mexico, from Europe, or from Yemen, from Syria, Lebanon, wherever. You know what it means when you don't have rights. You've lived it. When you're there, you saw dictators operate. You saw that you couldn't speak or you couldn't practice your religion freely. So you can use that source, that knowledge and that experience when you're here to your advantage. And you got to guard those rights that Americans have here. And sometimes people don't know what they don't have when they've never lost it. I mean, many Americans who grew up here, born here, they don't know how good they have it. They don't know the unbelievable rights they have to exercise their religion, to assemble, to speak. You do. You've seen both worlds. So you guys should be on the front line guarding those rights. What was one of the observations, and that kind of compelled me to get a little bit motivated to speak about this a little bit more, is I couldn't believe the hysteria in the Muslim American community, and actually the Mexican, the immigrants, a lot. There was hysteria. And you wanted to just calm people down and say, first of all, the Constitution is the same. The rights that you had before the election are the same as after the election. You have to know that. Nothing has changed. Your rights are equal as even President-elect Trump's rights. My words are saying it, but they are. He's going to only have one right over all of you. He's going to have Secret Service the rest of his life. But other than that, your rights are equal. Because I wanted to really make 3 points here. About your rights being equal. You heard about this Muslim registry and Muslim. Folks, this is nonsense. I've been doing civil rights for 21 years. Judge Adam Shakoor, Peter, they'll tell and why am I saying that? This is not just emotion or someone just saying it. This is rooted in our Constitution, and you have to know that. This is what I'm saying about guarding your rights. And I want to read something very important for you. Many of you know about it, you've heard about it, but I want to read the words exactly. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. This is important. There is so much case law on this issue, thousands of opinions on this. There's two concepts in that sentence that I've said. I'll say it again, please, and I'm not going to bore you with constitutional language, but there's one sentence you have to be aware of, which has just from it spun. And Judge Shakoor and Professor Hammer can concur to this. This sentence, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. So the first part here is Congress. You cannot establish one religion over another. Understand that. So when you hear Muslim registry, civil rights, the lawyers think how can that be? Because then you're establishing one religion over another. We know that when the Protestants came here to form America, they were escaping, the abuse in England. They came, and that was before the Second Amendment. Everybody's passionate about the Second Amendment, but the First Amendment, the first priority, first thing, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment. You can't. So if you do a Muslim, that means what? That means you're establishing a church or Judaism or another religion over Muslims. You can't do it. I know you heard, they did the Japanese internships, or you heard of, folks, that's ethnicity. First of all, it's wrong. We had to pay reparations for that. That, doesn't make it right. But there's a difference. First Amendment is so guarded of religion. Got to understand that. Now, it's going to get to my second point. Just understand the second part of this amazing sentence. I'm going to say it again. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or, this is called the Establishment Clause, what I just read. Google it. Establishment Clause. You learn it, understand it. Or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's called the Free Exercise Clause. They cannot establish law to chill your ability to practice your religion. If you have a Muslim registry, people are going to be scared. People are going, oh, I'm not Muslim. They're not going to practice in public. They're not going to go to the mosques. You're chilling their ability to exercise their religion. So this is a fundamental violation of two major clauses within the First Amendment. So understand that. That's the first point I really just wanted to hammer home. I know there's a lot of things we say, but if you can learn 3%, please understand the First Amendment. And it's not just gobbledygook, just Constitution. No, that one sentence. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's it. So you've noticed, and I wrote an op-ed about that to the New York, and never made it because I was very upset when I saw that, and I even heard about it, and obviously it wasn't published because I was trying to make a distinction on this issue. And then if you notice, through the campaign, the rhetoric changed. There's no longer a Muslim registry because someone got there. He can't do that. So what did he focus on? From countries that harbor. So it's morphed. So understand, I understood it, the nuances. Lawyers would understand the distinction. But the common folk wouldn't understand it if they really weren't paying attention to it. So understand that. Because that goes to my second point, is if you have that knowledge and you have that confidence in your rights and you know how cherished those rights are, when you act, you should act based on conviction and not fear. Not fear. Many people are out there now because they're scared. And I'll tell you, if you look at the first generation immigrants regarding this, their reaction is different than the third generation homegrown American here. The first generation immigrant, oh my God, we're going to get deported. They're going to take my kids. That's how they think because they know they've seen another terrible world in Syria and Lebanon and Yemen, and they've seen the Gestapo tactics. They've seen it. They've seen family members, death, they've seen it. So they have a lot of PTSD, post-traumatic stress. They're reliving. People have pain in their stomach. There's women, my kids go to a Muslim school. The mothers are crying. It is. But it's based on fear. And so they're acting now. They're out there trying a coalition, but it's based on fear, not conviction, that you have every right to be a foot soldier of the Constitution, to be a guard of that First Amendment for every other American. You have to think from that. Why is that important? Because your kids will see it. They're going to know, you know what? I'm not here in a foreign land. This is my country. I see my parents. Wow, I know about. You're giving them the confidence, the backbone, the strength to act based on their knowledge of their constitutional rights, not based on fear. Totally two different sources of motivation. So it's important for you to just recognize that. It would get to the point where, if you really think about it, this Muslim registry, because now you've gone through the different emotions. You were scared, fearful, bad, morning after, it's terrible. But now there should be this sense of outrage. Muslim registry, you know what? That's an attack on our First Amendment. That's an attack on our Constitution that we are all here, we have sworn to uphold. We should think of it from that. I know I'm a lawyer, so I'm talking that way, but I want to instill upon everybody here. And it's that is so foreign to our First Amendment. The very first clause shall make no law respecting establishment of religion. And the second clause of the First Amendment are prohibiting they're trying to muzzle, they're trying to stifle us from exercising our religion. They're trying to set a precedent. So now it's Muslims, next will be Catholics, next it could be Jews. You're setting a dangerous precedent here. This is not just a Muslim issue, folks. And I have to get to my third point, because this is not a Muslim issue. This is an American issue. It's a First Amendment issue, and all of you should be knowledgeable about it. And when you act, you can act from that source of knowledge. You know, good experience is what happened after September 11. And all of the people, you know, we overreacted. And there's been a recognition of that. We went to Afghanistan, we took care of it, then we went into Iraq. And what we did in Abu Ghraib, it's a violation of every provision of the Geneva Convention. War crimes left and right. Someone's wearing an American flag in a prison in Abu Ghraib, torturing other humans. Folks, I took that very personal. I'm saying this because that's a personal ride I took when I went in August of 2004. After a guy came into my office, he said they tied. Guy came before even the pictures came out. Another guy came, not Isa, another guy, Mr. Saleh. He said he just came from Abu Ghraib, and they tortured me. Americans tortured me, and I said, Abu what? It's a big bad prison. I said, the one I know is Jackson. I don't know. He's talked about Abu Ghraib. He goes, they tied rope to my genitals to other men. They push us. We laugh. I said, Americans did that? That's nonsense. I couldn't believe it. 2 weeks later, pictures came out in 60 Minutes. And he knew the people in there, and I was so, at that time I already had some experience in civil rights because of the September 11. So I was so disappointed, and I made it a mission that we're gonna do whatever we can to hold these people accountable. Because I took America personally. I didn't want her to be defaced. That's how I took it. And I went there, wore a beard, put everything, didn't speak it, met people for 2 weeks. We got all the ammunition. We came here, filed a class action. The case is still going. It's in Washington, D.C., or in Virginia. It's been 4 times up on appeal. And just 2 weeks ago, we have a published decision which stands for the notion that if an American corporation, we sued interrogators who did a lot of the deeds there. It's been a 12-year struggle. And 30 lawyers, professors from all over the United States, Center for Constitutional Rights, other organizations, wonderful. The decision came down, published, that American corporations that engage in war crimes overseas can be hailed into court here in the United States. Folks, that's a culmination of 30 more attorneys in and out, professors, generals for peace wrote amicus briefs, coalition built everywhere. But now, anyone who engages, for example, try to enslave children to try to make shoes, to try to build oil, enslave a village. There's companies that did that. I'm not going to mention them. That enslave a village to build oil pipes. All of them now, because of this law, it's published. That means it's not. And folks, that's based on the Constitution and its recognition for human rights. So I'm just giving you an example of how I use that source of conviction of what America represents. And this is important to carry forward with it. This goes to the third point. Knowing your rights, be motivated based on your based on conviction of your rights and not fear. And then the third one is, you got to take ownership of the narrative that's being established here. While everybody here kind of alluded to it, has been worrying about their homes and their college and their degrees and their PhDs. You heard the ISPU. We Muslim Americans, they're the second richest ethnic group or religious group. But where's the money being spent? Where is the coalition building that's going out there? Because what happened is people have, every Muslim American community has paid a dear price. What's the price? We have let ISIS define what Islam is instead of every hardworking, good Muslim American showing Americans what Islam really represents. That's what has happened, folks. That's a wake-up call in another way. Because everything we know is Allah's will in different ways, God's will in different ways. We know that. But you got to think about it. What has the Muslim American community done really to benefit America as a whole? I know a lot of things have, now it's coming now. They've been very involved in the Flint crisis, $100,000 to help the water treatment in Detroit. CARE has been established. There's ISPU now is trying to understand the demographic makeup. I'm saying all of these different organizations, but how many have joined other boards, other members, coalition built with other organizations, non-Muslim organizations, people of conscious organizations, peace-loving organizations that all share the same goals and objectives. And you know what? I know it wasn't meant out of arrogance. I'm not saying that, or I'm not scolding. It's not. The focus has been, I've left this terrible country overseas. It's I want to get established here. I want to try to provide a better life to my children. And that's the common concern for first-generation immigrants, no doubt about it. But that focus, there has to be a reset in that rethinking process. There are other issues also involved. There's other people hurting here, non-Muslims hurting all around us. And we see it. We have to build bridges together. That's been the theme here, coalition build. It's interesting, we're all saying the same thing. We have to take narrative of that to show the goodness of Islam through conduct, through action, not just speech, we're good. No, doing. Showing, participate in different things, in the cancer walks, and in any other organizations that they want to feed the homeless. That's something that we believe in. Well, yeah, it doesn't have to be, of course. It's that thought process. We have to expand that. And you know what? Through time, we'll be able to define that narrative. I just wanted to thank you again, and I hope these 3 points will resonate in some way to kind of make us all rethink about how to approach things, digest it, and hopefully, we go. I'll finish with the very famous saying that said, "The same fire that melts butter hardens steel." Okay, the same fire, the adversity. You're either going to melt like butter, or you're going to be stronger, positive, in a positive way. Thank you very much.